Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, EmeraldPlanet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the EmeraldPlanet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the EmeraldPlanet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And as we head towards 2050 and we have 2 billion, yes, that's right, 2 billion new souls on the planet, how we're going to be able to take care of them. And one of those issues, of course, is the basic infrastructure, but specifically in transportation and in energy production. And so we have an expert that's sitting with us that's going to be talking about the conservation and how to do much more with much less as far as energy is concerned, and also the other issues as far as transportation. We have Nicole Steele, who is LEEDAP, and I'm going to let her talk about what that professional designation means. She's the program manager for policy and research at what is called the Alliance to Save Energy. And that's a very nice name that you have, Nicole.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, speaking about the LEED AP, it's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. I am an accredited professional. When I was a land use planner, I moved in that direction to learn about green building, and that's exactly what that is.
And I think that's absolutely fantastic because now you're with the Alliance to Save Energy. This really fits in, you know, the LEED designation, even though it's not just about energy efficiency, but it's really the totality of the buildings that we have and the more efficient use of energy. But tell us a little bit about the Alliance, and then I know that you have a number of very important associate members that are part of the organization. Just tell us a little bit about both, and then we'll get into exactly what you're doing and also the transportation side of all this.
All right, absolutely. So the Alliance to Save Energy is an organization that focuses on using less and doing more around energy efficiency specifically. So it was created over 35 years ago during the OPEC oil crisis by two members of Congress. It was a bipartisan effort with Percy and Humphrey. And now we work specifically on energy efficiency issues. We are fuel neutral. And one of the really interesting things about our organization is that we have associate members, which are member organizations that are interested in the energy efficiency cause, from universities to large manufacturers to other environmental and nonprofit organizations that would be working in that field.
Well, I think it's absolutely fantastic, and the broad reach that you have in the meetings I've attended, it just looks like you have just about everybody represented there across all the different sectors that are concerned about all this as far as transportation, energy, design, national security, and all those other issues. But you have a very special program. It's called Energy 2030. What is Energy 2030?
So Energy 2030 is an initiative that came out of our Alliance Commission on National Energy Efficiency Policy effort, which was an over a year-long program where we wanted to work towards creating the next generation of energy efficiency policies. The Energy 2030 report has a set of recommendations on how to make the U.S. economy more energy efficient.
Well, this is really important because of the billions of dollars we're spending really on a day-to-day basis as far as energy is concerned and all the issues around energy. But the Alliance, this commission that you had on energy efficiency, tell us a little bit about that and how does that directly relate into the Energy 2030?
So what I said, the Alliance Commission on National Energy Efficiency Policy was an initiative created by the Alliance itself, and it has high-level individuals from experts around the country, from heads of utilities to executive directors for university programs, representing the defense community. We wanted to get a large range of individuals that could really represent what feeds into all of the economic sectors around the use of energy in our economy. So we came together a little over a year ago And as Alliance staffers, we came to the group and said, how about we work towards creating the next generation of energy efficiency policies by reducing energy consumption by approximately 25%. And Governor George Pataki, who was one of the commissioners, said to us and said, I don't want to have anything to do with that program if that's the case, because I can tell you how to reduce energy consumption by 25%, just kick the economy in the teeth again, and we can get in that, we'll move in that direction. So what the commission decided to do is actually create a new goal of doubling energy productivity. So it's looking at energy efficiency in a much more positive sense.
So it's a proactive, and just like what we're doing with EmeraldPlanet, we're looking at the best practices and the positive side of all this to achieve the same goals that could be possibly addressed in a very different manner.
Absolutely, and really the message behind doubling energy productivity is getting more out of every unit of energy we use by 2030. So it's cutting energy waste in half by 2030.
And then looking at cutting the energy waste, so that really goes into the fact of much better conservation, much better use of the resource that we have, but also the facilities and the technologies that we're actually using, and so that can actually aid and expand the green jobs aspects of this, new technologies.
Absolutely.
And so what do you think will be the long-term impact as far as the Energy 2030?
Well, actually the impact was one thing that we were really interested in, looking at of what would happen if we were actually able to do this, if we were able to make our energy twice as efficient as it is today in just 17 years. So we had an independent group actually take a look at all sectors of the economy, and the results were actually a bit more surprising than we thought. So
the governor's challenge actually was a good thing then.
Absolutely, it was. So for example, by 2030, we could save Americans over $327 billion. Just in general.
Let's say that again. That's a lot of money.
We would save Americans over $327 billion by 2030.
That's an incredible amount of money, and you think of that going back into the economy, being used again to develop green jobs, to expand on the new technologies and products that are being used. That has a tremendous boon as far as just the economy is concerned, not counting the environment.
Absolutely, and so you mentioned the economy. One of the really exciting pieces that came out of this was that it would create 1.3 million jobs by 2030.
That's incredible. So these numbers really are quite significant and very positive. And when I was going back to the challenge the governor laid down as far as, I want to be involved in something that's positive, proactive, it really was a good track to take as far as moving towards the 2030 and, of course, what EmeraldPlanet towards 2050. So looking at how do you see that these ambitious goals actually are going to be achieved? What kinds of things are going to go into this to save these billions of dollars and to create these over 1 million new jobs?
Well, like I started to say, the commission worked for over a year to figure out a set of recommendations, and those recommendations were launched in early February, just before the State of the Union. There's over 50 recommendations in the Energy 2030 report.
So this is very detailed and also goes to really achievable goals over these next number of years.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. Really, the Commission's main goal was to make sure that those recommendations were actually actionable in a short amount of time. So we wanted to make sure that they were still audacious, but still plausible. And I'm actually quoting Heather Zeichel from the White House Council on Environmental Quality on that's how she received the Energy 2030 report.
That is absolutely fantastic. But looking at that, anything that we're doing out there, as far as objectives, need to be doable and measurable at the same time. And it sounds like through these various 50 recommendations that it's both doable and are going to be able to measure the outcomes of that. So what's going to be the balance? I know that you have this mantra, invest, modernize, and educate. So briefly describe those three, and then how do you see these being woven together as you move towards 2030?
Well, we wanted to come up with 3 strategies that would really serve as the pillar of these recommendations. They are that invest, modernize, and educate pillars. And we're not going to be able to meet that goal of doubling energy productivity without being able to focus on those areas. For example, invest would include improving financing options for building retrofits. Building retrofits is a huge opportunity. The existing building stock in this country needs to be retrofitted to be more energy efficient. Modernize, under those recommendations, there's a program called Race to the Top. It was a very successful program under the Obama administration for education, and the recommendation is to create an energy productivity style Race to the Top challenge. And so it would be a challenge geared towards states and local governments that would actually give the power to state and local governments to be more innovative and figure out on the ground, how do you make energy efficiency work?
And what they're going to do then is you're going to have localities, state governments actually in a friendly way competing to see who can be the best as far as energy efficiency, energy conservation. And then I would assume the next step is to take those best practices through your alliance and share those with all other municipalities and say, look what happened in this city or this county or that state, and these are things that you may look at and you'll be able to do.
Exactly. And so we don't want states to feel like they're actually competing against each other. They want to compete against themselves. So what they would do is benchmark where they are today and what is their energy productivity today and what can they do over the next couple of years. And then the alliance's role to actually take those best practices and new innovations and elevate them to the national level so they can be part of a more national conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're almost running out of time, and I told you this would be the fast and furious, but energy security, I know this is one of the things you're talking about, not the energy independent, but energy security. We have about 40 seconds left. What do you see at that, and then how is the Alliance going to help to continue to move this dialogue along?
Well, going back to the actual impacts of doubling energy productivity, the result of that report that we put together said that we would save over $100 billion in energy imports by 2030. Which would actually reduce our total energy consumption to 7% of external imports. And so what that does is make our nation more energy secure, and it actually takes away with those volatile price spikes that you could see at the pump, and so that's why it's so important.
Nicole Steele, LED AP, a Program Manager for Policy and Research, Alliance to Save Energy. Thank you for being with us and sharing, and thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
She's had more than a dozen fractures. And in the next few years, she faces 2 major surgeries to strengthen her fragile bones. She's only 10 years old. Most people don't worry about fragile bones until late in life. For those with osteogenesis imperfecta, brittle bones are a concern throughout their lifetime. Find out how you can strengthen this child's future.
Diabetes is a killer. After I was diagnosed, I didn't feel sick, so I didn't listen to my doctor. Then it struck. I had a heart attack, then a stroke, and I was only 49.
Most people with diabetes also have high blood pressure and cholesterol, which can cause severe heart damage. In fact, 2 out of 3 people with diabetes die from heart disease or stroke.
Don't let diabetes destroy your life.
Call for your free diabetes survival guide. Choose to live.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are taking us through the 21st century. And as we move towards 2050, when we'll have almost 9 billion souls on the planet, how we're going to be able to take care of all the basic infrastructure, along with education, healthcare, and then, of course, transportation. We're having a real struggle on the planet to move the 7+ billion we have now, but adding 2 billion more, we need to have really serious thought and also investment and debate about how we're going to move these folks and make sure that they actually have a higher quality of life, not a diminished quality of life just by adding people to the planet. We have a gentleman who's actually is doing a lot of thought about this and also working with a number of national and international organizations to determine how we're going to best move these people as we move towards 2050. Arthur L. Guzzetti is the Vice President for Policy. He's with the American Public Transportation Association, APTA. And Art, welcome.
Hi, Dr. Sam. Good to be with you.
Glad to have you here. And the presentations I've seen you do have actually been excellent. But tell us about the APTA. What is it, and how long has it been around, and how does it service the various members that it has?
First, just to come back at you, transportation, a means to an end, so sometimes overlooked as something in itself. But APTA is the American Public Transportation Association. It's the trade association for
we're going to bring up a slide here if we can. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, where the transit systems around the country, where the businesses that work in partnership with the transit systems to help with their operations and their capital programs. APTA goes back to 1882.
I saw that in the information about you, 1882. That's when all these these transportation systems literally were just being created.
We were talking about horse-drawn vehicles at the time, but the problems, pollution, congestion, and the cost of fuel are the same now as they were then. Altogether, in America, there are 36 million boardings on public transportation every day. It's a $57 billion industry. Those are some numbers, but it is a big deal. And APTA is the thought leader, the advocate, the statistician, and we're full service.
Well, looking at all this, and we were talking about as the prelude to all this, we had we have 9 billion people on the planet. We're adding 2 billion new people.
Yes.
And many people say, well, we don't want that many. Well, the fact is they're going to be here,
yes,
whether we're ready for it or not. So looking at the commitment of your organization to public transportation, but also really the whole thing about moving people, making sure they get to their jobs, they have a higher quality of life. How do you mesh all this together as an association and incorporate everybody that's involved in this process?
Well, we look at sustainability in two ways. First of all, public transportation is a strategy for communities themselves to be sustainable. But then we also look at it, how can we, as organizations, be sustainable? And we've taken, much as university presidents and mayors have done, had pledges, have metrics. How can we make our operations, our buildings, our water and fuels, how can we recycle HVAC, how can we learn from one another on that? As an example, Sam, 10 or 15 years ago, only less than 2% of the transit vehicles in operation were alternate fueled by either hybrid or electricity or hydrogen or CNG. Today, that number is over 30%.
Yeah, but looking at that change, I mean, it's really dramatic what's going on. And also, if you look at a city like Washington, D.C., New York, Chicago, then jumping over to Bonn, Berlin, Tokyo, London, many people now are just saying we don't want to have a personal conveyance. We're looking at public transportation really as our first line as far as getting to places.
Yes.
And then if we have some special use, then we'll go out and consider something just for, myself or my family. So what are you seeing as far as the change as we're moving through the 21st century of people people rethinking transportation itself.
The idea is to give people choice and options, and for too long, going back from when the interstate highway era, which were very important to the country economically, but over time there was no choice but to drive too many places. We view public transportation as part of that system. It's part of choices. The car is important for some trips, but public transportation can be there for other trips. So the trends are such that in the future, public transportation will be a more prominent part of a balanced system.
Yeah, well, the whole thing of balance, I think this is something that's really important. And looking at energy efficiency, energy conservation, public transportation really ranks at the very top of that.
Yeah.
And people say, well, when you're putting a bus on the road, it uses this much fuel. Yeah. But yet when you're moving dozens of people or a subway, you're moving hundreds of people. That is really almost, in some ways, the height of efficiency.
Yeah, well, first of all, 70% of the nation's petroleum is used for the transportation sector. We can make the vehicles more efficient, but to get more people on, say, a train that can carry 1,500 people, or the buses, that works good. But Sam, it's a matter of displacing automobile trips, put people on public transportation. It's a matter of alleviating congestion, helping the system work better through public transportation, and it's about the communities that shape around public transportation. For example, you can have 30% of your urban land consumed in parking and roads and big intersections, but to do it more efficiently, you can get it down to 9%. The whole community can change.
Well, it's just tremendous, and also, too, the economic development that springs up around and grows organically around metro stops. Buses for sure, but certainly for the subways, regardless of the city. And they really become a magnet for economic development, to new investments, and also a convenience as far as the consumer is concerned.
We talk about the green jobs, and sure, the smart grid is important, and solar and wind and all that, but transportation is a huge sector of the economy. Potential for green jobs as we make the system more energy efficient.
Well, looking at this ridership, this is from 1957, 2012. Of course, we're moving beyond that, but it's just incredible that huge dip that we had there, and now how it's been growing back on a gradual basis. And even with the worsening economies around the globe, is that public transportation seems to be more and more of the option of choice for more people.
Well, we're talking about a trend. We're more than double the rate of population growth for the last 18 years. We're cutting into market share. Sam, you mentioned real estate. We just did a report, and it showed that properties in proximity to public transportation stations is holding its value, is gaining value much more than similar properties that aren't in proximity to transit. That's the same thing with ridership. People voting with their feet. Real estate, people voting with their feet. When people are asked at the ballot box, do you want more public transportation in our community? The answer similarly is coming back yes.
Well, I think if you look at this slide here and the increase in ridership, and then go back here as far as how people want to have this, and the whole thing that you're doing too, Art, I think is really ingenious, is that you're not just looking at areas where they currently have public transportation or a concentration of that, you're looking at areas outside in the suburban areas, even rural areas, and how do you think in those areas can we incorporate, just like what you do in, say, in China, Japan, Vietnam, and places like that, where they have a very extensive public transportation. It goes to every hamlet in the whole country.
And people need public transportation options no matter where they are, city, suburb, outside of, in rural areas. It's a lifeline to life. But you'll find that as you put more public transportation, as you invest more in places, say, like suburbs, the suburb will change itself. It will become more a place where trips can be more oriented to public transportation.
Well, people are more comfortable there. They can take their families. It reduces the amount of expenditures. And as we look at the younger generations, they're looking at now more in terms of, do I really want to have an automobile? Do I want to have all the, support all this infrastructure myself? Or do I just go and I use public transport and then explore other options as far as how I want to deal with my own individual transportation?
Well, that's true. There is a generational change going on. The attitudes are changing. The love affair with the car isn't the same as it was with the baby boomers. That doesn't mean the car is not important and will be and it'll still continue to be important in the future, but the options are what's important looking forward.
Well, looking at the ways that many people are trying to generate new ways of using public transportation, make it much more energy efficiency, what are some of the things that is your association seeing from the various members of your association, and how they're actually more and more trying to be off-grid or distributive energy, as it's called, and generate more of their own power from within their own organization itself?
Yeah, we're doing that, for example, on buses can have, or trains, regenerative braking. So as the system's slow, they can generate power. We're APTA, a big part of what we do is share best practices with one another. So when we get together, we talk about those things and how we can operate, because of course it's not only good for the community, it's not only good for the environment, it's also good for the bottom line in our businesses. We save money by doing those kinds of things.
Well, looking at public transportation, I know in the United States this is something, it's almost an ongoing, I shouldn't say necessarily a debate, but discussion about how do we do it, how can it be cost effective, what's the long-term benefits as far as jobs, tax base, and the mobility of human beings, even reducing accidents, increasing safety. How do we balance all this, Art, so that we bring all these various benefits into play, but do it in a way that's cost effective, but it involves the citizens themselves?
Yeah. Well, one thing is that transportation is part of a holistic set of public policy strategies. We're part of policies not just on transportation, we're part of policies on environmental legislation. We're part of the policies on energy legislation. Importantly, we're part of the policies on economic legislation. So these are things that affect people's households. Use of, for example, transportation, Sam, is 19% or so of household expenditures.
So if you could just reduce that 1 to 2%, it would be huge,
and that's
as
money
far as
that
each family is concerned.
And that money can be used in other things. I mean, transportation, again, is a means to an end. So if you can, and that's one of the factors behind the generational change in transit. They're finding, well, we can spend less money on our transportation, but that's more money for vacations or more money for the other things we like to do.
Well, Art, we've run out of time. Arthur L. Guzzetti, who is the Vice President for Policy, American Public Transportation Association, APTA. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing with us. And Art's going to be around with us for a while, but as we look around the globe looking for transportation, how we're going to move people in the 21st century to reduce costs, have more energy efficiency as we create the Emerald Planet.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip@aol.com.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
Well, it looks like we're back. This is the EmeraldPlanet. Dr. Sam Hancock of EmeraldPlanet come to you from Washington, D.C. and the United States. And thank you for being with us, because we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And of course, we know transportation is one of those key investments that individuals and communities alike must make. They use a tremendous amount of energy, fossil as well as renewable. And so where are we going to go as we move through the 21st century and add 2 billion more people by 2050? And so we have a gentleman who's actually involved day to day thinking about a system that's moving a huge number of people, over 1 million people a day, and at the same time think about how to generate their own energy and to be much more efficient, and then to be able at the end of the year to balance their budget. Even though it is public transportation, you still need to be able to pay for the goods and services and salaries that you're using, and yet provide the highest level of service to your customers. Erik S. Johanson is the Strategy Sustainability Planner of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority. SEPTA is a name it goes by. And we're going to have him on, coming in from Philadelphia by Skype. And I'm going to have beside me is author Guzzetti, who is the Vice President for Policy with the American Public Transportation Association. Erik, in case we lose you, Art's going to come here and cover for us. And we'll keep on chatting.
Sounds
but
good.
Glad to have you here. Welcome from Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. again. Tell us a little bit about what is SEPTA and when it started and the importance.
Yeah, so as Art said, SEPTA provides about 1 million of that 36 million boardings per day in this country, with the 6th biggest transit agency in the country providing the same sort of services that Metro provides to DC, to the greater Philadelphia area. It's been around for 50 years.
Okay, we're having a little interference, and I think our technicians are going to take care of that. But SEPTA, really, you said, is one of the largest organizations in the United States, and very important. What are some of the key initiatives that you're taking at SEPTA that's doing this balance between moving people and at the same time generating your own energy and also increasing conservation of power? Yeah.
So SEPTA created a sustainability program in 2010 to do all those things that just mentioned. It's important to note that we did it focused on the strategic business plan. So it wasn't about necessarily going green per se. It was about improving the bottom line, but doing it in such a way that protected the environment. We have a triple bottom line based sustainability program that looks at environmental, social, and economic indicators. And it's been really important for us to ground that program in a triple bottom line approach so that it's given the same sort of credibility at SEPTA as any other sort of strategic plan.
You're coming in much better. Also, I want to pull up this first slide that you shared with us as far as this triple bottom line, the balance between the environment, social, and economic. And let's see if we can get this up on the screen for our visitors both here and abroad to see this. But we'll talk about some of these key initiatives. I know that there's really been a real focus through there, and sustainability really is the core of what you're doing, Erik, at SEPTA. And looking at these goals, how do you balance all these goals? You have these, I think you referred to them as the 12 pillars that you have for SEPTA. Share a little bit about this.
Yeah, so there's a fundamental balance here between looking at SEPTA, the corporation, as I think of it, in terms of ways that we can make SEPTA more sustainable, but also looking at SEPTA, as Art mentioned, public transit being a sustainability solution for communities. And so for each of those 3 pillars, we have 2 goals that are focused internally to make SEPTA more efficient, but 2 goals focused externally to make the region more efficient through SEPTA. So it's been very important for us to strike that sort of balance and kind of practice what we preach internally, but also get our message out there so that the greater Philadelphia region knows the services that we provide for sustainability.
Well, I like this, the logo that you have, and also this image. I know that you said that you have one of the older systems within the United States, maybe even within North America. But at the same time, you're trying to incorporate new technologies and new methodologies as far as both the equipment you're using and the ways of better using or actually avoidance of energy. So looking at how do you modernize at the same time you try to increase the energy efficiency?
Yeah, so Art mentioned one of the big ones for us, which is known as regenerative braking. Just a brief background on that for people who don't technically know what regenerative braking is all about. In the late part of the 20th century, trains started running with a dynamic braking process rather than a friction braking process, which enabled regenerative braking. As regenerative braking, which basically feeds energy back into the system to make it more energy efficient, came about, started looking at ways of storing that energy. Some of it is stored back into the system, but some of it is dissipated as heat. And so one of our biggest initiatives right now is to look at ways of capturing regenerative braking created by our trains and pumping it back into the system to make them more efficient.
Well, we're looking at one of these very modern buses that you have there, but you have something that's called the Wayside Energy Storage Project. What is the Wayside Energy Storage Project, Erik?
Well, simply, in a way, it's creating a hybrid concept for a train line. So you show that bus. One of the things that the Wayside Energy Storage Project is going to allow us to do is, in the same way that a hybrid bus recharges its battery as it brakes, our train line that has this Wayside Energy Storage battery is going to capture that regenerative braking and store it in a battery. Now, we've gotten a lot of recognition for this project, and it's not necessarily because the technology is the most innovative out there, but we've gotten a lot of recognition for this project because of the way that we're using this battery. So one of the things that we're doing is we've partnered with a smart grid firm called Verinity Energy, which is taking the stored energy from the battery and optimizing its use. And the reason why this is important is because of the whole concept of cost-benefit analysis and ROI that I talked about earlier. This had to make economic sense for us. So working with Verinity, they're going to make sure that that battery provides a ROI for us by selling some of that energy back into the grid.
Well, I think this is absolutely tremendous because not only do you want to be users of energy, I think more and more public transportation organizations and even commercial buildings and manufacturers are thinking about how they can benefit from this movement towards greater energy efficiency, conservation, but also the feed-in tariff system, regardless of what it's called, you know, in various community states or between nation states. But it's really important that we actually, just like we're trying to grow locally, eat locally, it's the same thing with energy, is that we want to be able to produce more than we're using, so we increase the quality of life. We have Art, as you know. Art Guzzetti is sitting right beside me of the APTA, which is a really good friend of yours. And I'm going to let him ask the next question so that we all stay collaborative and tied together. So Erik, I'm going to turn you over to Art.
Hi, Erik. I know that SEPTA has been developing the Energy Action Plan, and I want to invite you to talk about some of the successes that are coming from that.
Yeah, so one of the reasons we created an Energy Action Plan was there was so much going on in the energy world that we felt like we needed our own comprehensive plan to address it. So what we did was we basically inventoried all of the sources and uses of energy we have in our system, vehicles, facilities, technologies, and put together a comprehensive inventory of energy uses. Then we established 3 principles for our Energy Action Plan, and these are really important. The first is that every strategy we have in our Energy Action Plan be budget neutral. And basically what that means is they have to have a return on investment, and we have to go out and look for new sources of revenue and new sources of funding to pay for them. It's important because SEPTA doesn't have necessarily a lot of extra money and funding to pay for these things, so we have to keep it budgetly constrained. Second one is to leverage existing assets. SEPTA is an older system, so we need to make sure that we're investing in our system and reinvesting in our infrastructure. And the third is to provide multiple benefits. So this battery that you're seeing on the screen here, this battery is going to reduce energy consumption 10 to 20% at the substation where it's installed. But as I said earlier, it's also going to generate a new source of revenue, which is going to allow us to reinvest in our system and to buy new batteries in the future.
Well, looking at this, and this is something that's really important, Erik, that SEPTA itself is really trying to provide the impetus and also leadership as far as what's going on with the Alliance to Save Energy and their movement towards this Energy 2030. So what are you doing to achieve this double energy productivity for this target of 2030?
So we've committed to buy another 160 hybrid buses. As Art mentioned, there's been a huge uptick in the entire industry in terms of the number of alternative fuel vehicles that are on the roads. He said it was about 30%. SEPTA is going to be close to 50% of its buses by 2015. So that's a big commitment. Hybrid buses are more expensive than standard diesel buses, but they return because of huge fuel savings on the back end. The other thing that we're looking at now is retrofit of our facilities. Nicole mentioned improving financing options for facility retrofits. We're going to be working with energy savings companies to reduce the energy consumption of some facilities that are close to 100 years old. So there's a lot of potential consumption reductions there.
I want to bring up this last slide. So we have this, we're looking at something that shows the integrated nature of what it is that you're doing. But looking at this as far as what's called V-Power, I think this is really how you're generating your power. And we only have about 30 seconds left, Erik. Just explain this to us quickly and as the next step for SEPTA.
Yeah, so V-Power is Veridity's engine that helps us to optimize our energy. So as the trains come in and they break, the energy is stored in the battery. V-Power helps us to decide how to best use it. We either reduce consumption on our system or we sell it back to the grid for new revenue. And we use that revenue to reinvest in our system to further reduce energy consumption.
Well, thank you for being with us. We just had Erik S. Johanson, who is the Strategy and Sustainability Partner of Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, SEPTA, and he's sharing with us how not only are they a user of power and energy, but also they're generating and selling back into the grid. So as all of us, they're becoming much more energy efficient as we move towards 2050 to create the Emerald Planet.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Listen to
all right, you just stay right there. Move over.
Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rigged out money. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water. At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site. That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff. You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent!
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school,
These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
Hello and welcome back to the Emerald Planet. Thank you for being with us. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, President and Executive Director of the Emerald Planet and EmeraldPlanet TV in Washington, D.C. We come to you on a weekly basis to talk about the 1,000 best practices that we're identifying in the 144 targeted countries that we work with around the globe. And so we're looking for the technologies, the services, and the products, but also the people that are making a difference as we move towards 2050. And we're sharing with you now 3 people that are really some of the brain trusts as far as this balance of energy efficiency, energy conservation, but also production and transportation, focused primarily on public transportation and how we're going to be able to move almost 9 billion souls by 2050. That's a lot of people we're going to be moving on a day-to-day basis. And so sitting right beside me is Nicole Steele, who is Program Manager of Policy and Research of the Alliance to Save Energy. And she's a lead AP certified individual. And then we have Arthur L. Guzzetti, who is the Vice President for Policy at the American Public Transportation Association, SEPTA. And then coming in from Philadelphia by Skype is Erik S. Johanson, Strategy and Sustainability Planner of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, SEPTA. So we have 3 outstanding professionals, individuals that are leaders within the United States and actually the world, because all 3 of these organizations, even though they're located within the United States, actually reach out around the globe. So Nicole, I'm going to start off with you since you're the rose between the 2 thorns here, as we like to joke. What are the 3 things that any organization, regardless of its size, needs to think about as far as energy usage, conservation, and really looking towards the future to reach this Energy 2030 that you've set up through the Alliance?
There are obviously many different steps that organizations of any size could take, but off the top of my head, I would throw out one of the most important things is for an organization to actually benchmark their energy use. That means it helps them set a baseline so they know what kind of energy they're using today, and then as they do integrate energy efficiency technology such as lighting sensors or LED lights into their office space, they're able to figure out actually how much energy they're saving over time.
Well, you know, this is one of the things, I've had this conversation for years. Many of you talk about these very simple, practical things that people are going to do, you know, recycle, buy local food, you know, change out your light bulbs. And then people get to that and they say, you know, how is that really important? But the thing is that whatever anybody can do, let them do it, right? Mm-hmm. And as an organization, that's really what you're all about, is how to make it practical and be able to move forward. Art, looking at, I know you're a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. You provide a public good of bringing together public transportation organizations and all that. But how can private companies, and we're looking at the for-profit sector, around the globe participate in this movement towards greater use of public transportation, and maybe again 2 or 3 ideas that's very practical that a business person can say, I can do that?
Yeah, well, public transportation is a partnership of government and the private sector. So by nature, it is a public-private partnership around. In fact, to grow the way we're going to grow in the future is going to require a bigger role of the private sector. In regards to sustainability, the private sector chases markets. Now, they chase market. I see the public transportation, as the trends are all suggesting, is going to grow into the future. But also on sustainability and energy efficiency, that's where things are going. In the future, so the private sector to be on top of the market trends, they're going to be doing all these things. And as the public transportation systems seek to do all these things, like with lighting and with water usage and making our buildings better and making our operations better, the private sector see those market trends and they're going to be right there with us.
Okay, well, looking at those, the very practical steps that need to be taken, and it's really important that we actually do have the private sector and all the public venues very much involved in this. And of course, Nicole, with the Alliance, you're really taking a leadership in that. But Erik, looking at SEPTA and providing public transportation, I know at the same time that you're trying to provide more service to more people, yet you're challenged by increasing cost of energy and just the overall cost of operations. So how do you strike this balance to manage your energy use, producing energy, which you now talk about actually putting back into the grid, and then also much more energy efficiency among the rolling stock that you have regardless of the mode of transportation?
Yeah, so our energy action plan addresses that in three ways. Understanding that we're never going to be fully non-volatile in energy markets, you can reduce energy demand from your services by making them more efficient. You can use more energy efficient technologies, and you can switch to cheaper, more stable energy sources. So one of the things that we're looking to do is potentially power part of our rail system with a combined heat and power plant that would use natural gas to provide electricity. It would provide more stability. It would provide a backup power source from the grid. And it would use low-cost natural gas. That's one example of a way that we're looking to potentially shift an energy source to provide better stability and a lower-cost service.
You know, I'm going to follow on a question to that, and hopefully that you can share with us. But, you know, many people say, well, that's still a fossil fuel, and we're still burning this fossil fuel, but yet you're switching your buses at a very rapid rate from diesel to natural gas. Now you're talking about having your own power plant that's going to be powered through natural gas. What are some of the benefits of switching your rolling stock, the buses, from diesel over to natural gas? And what's the importance to the environment of doing that?
Well, we've actually invested heavily in hybrid technology. We've made a business decision that we believe hybrid technology in SEPTA's urban stop-and-go environment in Philadelphia is much more beneficial because hybrid technology is most efficient in a stop-and-go environment. CNG performs less well from a miles per gallon standpoint in that environment. So we've chosen to look at natural gas as a potential source for our trains where we don't have that stop and go environment. So we've invested heavily over the past 10 years in hybrids based on a business decision that's fundamentally based on the fuel economy of the various competing vehicle technologies.
Well, Nicole, looking at what you're doing as far as the Alliance, and you have this very ambitious goal by 2030 of doubling the efficiency of energy, and I like the proactive and positive nature of that. What gives you confidence that the governments, private industry, the citizens are really ready to collaborate, work together to bring about, to meet these goals, but also to lower their own costs within each of these three major sectors?
Well, I would say that the confidence that I have right now is that energy efficiency is actually America's greatest energy resource. The energy.
Say that again. That's a profound statement, and most people miss the obvious.
So what I was saying is that America's greatest energy resource is energy efficiency. And I say that because if we weren't able to integrate energy efficiency into our lifestyles, into our businesses, into the economy over the past 35 years, we would actually have to use 50% more energy today than we did 35 years ago, just to be where we are. And so I have the confidence that we've been working on it over the past 35 years, and we can continue to integrate existing technologies into the economy to continue to double that energy productivity by 2030.
This is one of the things I think Nicole and also Art, I believe you can attest to this, is that we're really using more and more off-the-shelf technologies as we have the internet and we have all the computing power, and it goes to really helping us as far as energy efficiency, reducing the use, whether it's fossils or even renewable energy. But looking at public transportation, how do you see this avoidance, renewal, reduction, and alternative all combining in order to lower costs, extending the range and the usability of public transportation, but at the same time creating a greater public good for all citizens?
Well, right off the bat, public transportation is helping. Just the existing levels are saving 39 million metric tons of carbon and 4.2 billion gallons of petroleum. But one thing we haven't talked a whole lot about is the community efficiencies. There is so much energy inefficiency that comes from communities where you have to use a gallon of gas to buy a quart of milk. So as we develop our communities better in the future, in a forward-looking way, around a balanced system, we're going to find there's going to be trips not taken, that you can walk to where you're going. And public transportation is going to be at the core of that, but it's going to be part of a balanced system. But there will be energy efficiencies come in multitude just from the community that's oriented around balanced transportation choices.
Well, it's just like Tyson's Corner is developing as a new city, really, and it's one of the largest shopping areas and also business generators for Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland, and Washington, D.C., and then running 4 metro stations into that area and avoiding cars, actually even eliminating parking areas and turning that into more usable public space, I think really goes to the heart of what you're talking about, Art. And Erik, I'll be with you in just a minute, but I wanted to follow up on this question with Art. Looking at this notion of actually changing the uses of local communities and increasing the density, how does that increase the quality of life?
Well, it increases it. There's a sense of place that comes from those communities, a sense of walkability. Of course, quality of life is in the eye of the beholder. It is a subjective thing. But you certainly need choices. You shouldn't have to drive to everything you do, but too many times our communities in the post-interstate era were designed for exactly that. Less than half of the people, Dr. Sam, even have the choice to use public transportation for the trip, and really only about half of that is even what you call, say, a decent choice. So we have to give people more choices. We have to invest in those alternatives.
Well, Erik, I was going to ask you a question. Well, we have absolutely flat run out of time, but thank you for being with us from Philadelphia. And we're just going to have to exit right on out of here.
Okay.
I was going to give Nicole actually, you have the last word. So what would you like to share with our publics?
For more information on doubling energy productivity, go to energy2030.org.
And Sam, next time we'll talk about resiliency and how to make our infrastructure more resilient.
Well, we need to
storms.
continue this along. There's no doubt about it. There's so much to discuss here. And Erik, thanks for being with us out of Philadelphia. And thank you for being with us as we create the EmeraldPlanet.